Hello and welcome to Music is a Journey. I'm Peter and today I'm starting a series of 6 videos where I'm going to take a look at the discography of Opeth. I'm going to take a look at it 2 to 3 albums at a time, and specifically the goal of this was to talk about my favorite song from each of the albums. However, after recently having gone over most of the discography up to the point of the recording of this video, I'm finding it a little difficult to pick out a favorite from certain albums. So for today I'm going to start with the Heritage Pale Communion Sorceress block. And this is rather significant for me because this is where my journey into the discography of Opeth started, and also where the first phase of it finished, which we'll kind of understand by the end of the video. So first, let's take a look at the album Heritage from 2011. Heritage was released on September 11th, 2011 on Roadrunner Records. It was the band's third album with Roadrunner Records. Heritage is, of course, most famous for being the first album in the discography completely devoid of any death metal vocals. Well, not exactly the first. There was one before, but that was part of a 2-album set. So we're not actually going to count that one exactly. This is where Opeth decided that they were going to move on into a progressive rock direction completely and, say goodbye to the metal aspect of their music. This, of course, alienated a lot of fans, and in recent videos I've watched where people are talking about this album, some people love it and some people really dislike it. Other people say it took them some time to warm up to it. One video I watched, the person talking about it said that it took him a few listens, but he really got into the feel of the album after he saw them live during the tour for this album. And he said that he finally got it. It was like a feeling of being at some kind of like satanic cult worshipping session or something, and just kind of, being there off in the background of the circle watching what was going on. It is actually a very dark album and in some ways very heavy. Taking a look at the cover, this is symbolic of the Tree of Life, the roots going down into the depths of hell, which is reflective of the band's death metal roots. There are 4 band members' heads on the tree, and a 5th band member head is falling off. This is the head of Per Wiberg, who had decided to leave the band after the recording of this album. Now, in the beginning, when Michael Åkerfeldt sat down to write it, he originally wrote a couple of songs that were along the same lines of where they had been with the previous album 4 years ago, which was Watershed. And when he brought it to bass player Martin Mendez thought, it would be kind of disappointing if we went and did another album similar to what we've already done. And so Michael scrapped everything and decided to write anew. One of the first songs that he wrote, actually the first song that he wrote, was the song The Lines in My Hand, which is actually one of the songs I picked as one of my favorites here. I think I should just quickly go over things because I actually watched a video of Michael Åkerfeldt talking about all the different tracks on this album, so I have a few things to say about it. The opening track, Heritage, which is also the namesake of the album, and the title Heritage, by the way, is reflective of the Swedish musical heritage, and that actually comes up later on in here. But yeah, the opening track is an instrumental called Heritage, and then after that we move on to the Devil's Orchard. And actually from here on in, I really enjoy the album almost all the way through. I guess I should say that at the time I picked this up, I was really exploring progressive rock a lot. I'd had exposure to it throughout most of my musical interest life, but it was around 2011, 2012 I really started digging deep into progressive rock, and then I'd heard about Opeth, and so this was the first of the albums I picked up of theirs. So for me, this was a really exciting and interesting album. Of course, I had already become well familiar by this time with the works of Yes, Genesis, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Jethro Tull, Pink Floyd, and a lot of the big name bands from the 70s. Plus I picked up a lot of newer stuff like the Flower Kings, Glass Hammer, Porcupine Tree, Spock's Beard, and so on. And I felt that this album really had its own personal stamp. It was very different from the 70s stuff I'd heard, as well as most of the more recent stuff. So from The Devil Orchards on and I Feel the Dark, both these songs really captivated my interest and made me think, like, this is really incredible that people can write rock songs this way. Slither, I read, is dedicated to Ronnie James Dio, who passed away during the time of the recording of this album. Then there's Nepenthe, Hack's Process, and finally we get to my pick for my favorite song from this album, which has always been Famine. No matter how much I've enjoyed other tracks, Famine just always makes me stop whatever I'm doing or whatever I'm thinking about and get into it. Partly it's because I just really love flute together with rock or heavy rock. And this song is very interesting. It actually features the flute playing of a very famous Swedish flautist by the name of Björn Jason Lind. And I should point out that the Jason is written as J:"son, which actually comes from Jansen, which, as I read on Wikipedia, was his family line's original name way back, but his grandfather or great-grandfather changed the name to Lind. Anyway, very famous Swedish flautist from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, played in jazz fusion and rock and scored movies, that sort of thing. So he plays the flute on this album here, and as well nearby, apparently while they were recording the album, nearby was Alex Acuna, a very famous percussionist, so he also plays some of the percussion on that song. Famine is the longest song on the album at 8 minutes and 17 seconds, which is a little bit short for an Opeth song, but yeah. I really like how it starts with the flute, and then the organ seems to be struggling to find its footing, and then you get these weird extended droning notes, some sound effects, and then this like laughter in the distance that always makes me think of some kind of like blue Mexican devil in a village out in the Mexican desert, going around and knocking on doors of houses and peering in through the doors and windows and scaring everybody to heck. And even though he's not up to doing anything really nasty this time, everybody knows he has that potential. That's the impression I get. And then the song suddenly drops and becomes really peaceful, soft, with just these sustained piano single notes, and Michael starts singing, and then of course the guitar starts coming in, there's a drum roll, and then the song really picks up, similar to many of the other tracks on the album. And then it changes gears and slows down again, and then there's this build towards that really heavy, doomy type riff in the middle with the flute, which I love. And then after that we have another sung part before finally coming into a second repeat of that doomy riff. And when finally everything has exhausted itself, you get this kind of like horror music type sparse piano playing, and that laughter is in the background again, and this sound of like tape hiss. I really love that track. I do like the Lines in My Hand as well. I think that is a very driving piece. I love that the bass is just so forward in the song, and that's one thing revisiting the Opeth catalog. I found that the bass is really audible in so many of their songs, and often it's playing the role of an individual instrument as opposed to filling in the low end for the guitar. So overall, I really do like this album. I think it was Folklore was also one that Michael talked about, that he was playing around and he played for the band, and they all really loved it, even though he wasn't really sure. And finally, we have Marrow of the Earth, which was originally intended to be a song with the vocalist Natalie, I've forgotten her name now, but anyway, the woman who sang together on Coil on Watershed. It was originally written for her to sing, and she thought it was a little bit difficult for her to sing, so Michael just played the vocal lines as a guitar melody over it. I still really like this album. I know it's polarized fans. There are a lot of people who say it's really boring and they want the metal Opeth, but this has remained a favorite album of mine, and I can enjoy listening to nearly the whole thing, if not the whole thing, just about any time. So next up we're going to take a look at Pale Communion. By the time this album came out, it caught me a little bit by surprise, because I think I was going in step by step into the Opeth catalog. I hadn't like charged in head first. There was a gap after Heritage. I think actually this might have been my second purchase, possibly. I don't remember the order exactly, but it means that by the time I bought Heritage, it was already around 2000, probably 2013. So this came out on August 28th, 2014. So yeah. I read that Michael Åkerfeldt was looking to write an album with more melodies, more focus on melodies. And we can definitely hear that in the opening track there. Eternal Rains Will Come, as well as on the track The River. There's all these layered vocals. I don't know if they are all Michael's vocals. I would kind of suspect that there might be somebody else, perhaps one of the band members singing backup. I haven't looked into that in detail. There is also a lot more of these more flash proggy exercises. The previous album, Heritage, had some of these more sparser moments, and there's fewer of those moments on this album here, and there's more emphasis on the kind of, you know, weird, twisty-dancey type prog elements. The album opens up with, yes, Eternal Rains Will Come, and I really like how it opens. It starts off right off the bat. You know they're going to be on this prog bend here, but then it goes into this really soft melodic part, and honestly, I find it's almost a detraction. It's like, wow, we just had this great, exciting intro saying, oh yeah, Opeth are continuing on this prog journey, and then suddenly it's like, oh, or maybe not. Maybe we're going to get some like really slow ballady thing now. But it does come back to that and pretty much stays through the, you know, the active prog gymnastics part throughout the rest of the song. We go on to Cusp of Eternity, and this song is a little more simpler in structure. There's a lot of this really catchy driving riff that takes you out through most of the song. And then Moon Above, Sun Below. For a long time this actually was my favorite, and I especially like the part where Michael Åkerfeldt sings like some, he sings something about like some religion, and then when he sings in From Your Head, I think, he drops his voice and it sounds almost like he's tempting us, like he's going to go back to a death growl, but doesn't go there, and that's the closest we get to it on the whole album. I do like, it's also the longest song, it's over 9 minutes, and I like it for so many of the parts, but as with many longer Opeth songs, I feel that whenever they carry on in some really exciting part, like something that really gets into me and thinks, man, this part is really fantastic, after a couple of minutes they drop it and they completely switch over to something else. And I feel it's like, not a roller coaster, but it's like if you were to drop down on a roller coaster and then have to stop and gently ride along before the next hill and drop, rather than a continuous flow. So it's, even listening to it the other day, I still felt that I would like the momentum to continue a little bit more. But overall, I actually also really like this album here too. When I was listening to it again, I found that I pretty much enjoyed every track. The instrumental Goblin is interesting. I actually found Voice of Treason to be one of those sleeper tracks. Like, I didn't really remember how it went, but listening to it with the strings and the orchestra in there, I found it was actually a very exciting piece. But I think after this more recent revisit to this album, River is the track that stands out for me. And there was, I think, one person who said that he felt this album was pretty boring except for Cusp of Eternity. And then somebody reacting to his video said, you've got to go back and listen to River. That is really one of the most incredible tracks on the album. Now, I really love River. It starts off with that acoustic guitar. I don't know, is it a 12-string? And just these layered voices which become even more layered, and the vocal harmonies are even stronger, and it's unlike anything Opeth had done in their career up to that point, and possibly since then, I think. It reminds me exactly of some of these acoustic 70s pieces like Dust in the Wind or something like that, but very, very catchy. It then slows down a little bit, becomes a little simpler, and it almost makes me feel like, oh, come on, couldn't you have just continued writing, say, like a 4-minute song, doing what you did at the beginning? But then it switches over and suddenly gets very lively, and once again you get these, like, you know, prog pyrotechnics type thing. You get the dual guitar solo as they, call and response type of thing in each channel. You get, just a really, active progressive rock song closing out the song there. So it's actually in two parts, this beautiful acoustic part with all the vocal melodies and this fantastic prog circus show towards the end with this little quieter, simpler part in the middle. But that, for now, remains my favorite track off the album as of recent listens. I think I should also point out that by this time, Joachim Svalberg has taken over on keyboards, and I wanted to say that while it was Per Wiberg who played keyboards on the previous album, it was actually Joachim Svalberg who played on the opening track, the Heritage track, with the piano, and also that Martin Mendez plays an upright bass on that track. I kind of missed the chance to say that now, but it was after that Per left the band and Joachim Svalberg became the new keyboard player in time for this one. I guess I should also mention that the personnel on this album here, of course, Michael Åkerfeldt, guitars and vocals, Fredrik Åkesson, lead guitar, backing vocals, and this was his third album with the band. Martin Mendez on bass, Joachim Svalberg on keyboards, backing vocals and piano, and then Martin Axelrod on drums and percussion. So, an album that I do really enjoy as well. The production quality, I feel, is just a notch better than Heritage, and the guitar sound is a little bit more modern. Heritage was kind of going back to that old school 70s hard or heavy guitar sound. Here it feels a little bit more modern, and in some ways actually the guitars do get a little heavier than on Heritage, but we're still not in any kind of a metal sphere at this time. So the last album I'll talk about today is Sorceress, which was released on September 30th, 2016 on Nuclear Blast. One thing I want to say right off the bat of this album, the one thing that really makes it a little difficult for me to listen to is the production or the mixing. I'm not sure which it is. It was Tom Dalgety, I guess, who produced it. And he's an award-winning producer, but I really don't like the way this album sounds, especially the drumming. Martin Axelrod's drumming is something I really have been enjoying listening to on the last few albums, and I feel like everything here is under a velvet blanket. I find I have to listen to the album maybe once through and then again before I can start to ignore the problems. I did actually just happen to find on YouTube here not long ago that there is a remastered version. So there is a video showing the remastered version, which is here in a kind of yellow pulsing capsule type thing, and then there's the original with a red pulsing capsule. So maybe there's a remastered version with a better sound quality to it. But all the videos I've seen of people talking about this album, everybody comments on the production or the mixing of it. So the version I got is I pre-ordered this. This was the first Opeth album I was able to pre-order because at this point I had acquired all of the studio recordings up to this. Even got myself a Pale Communion t-shirt. So this was the first Opeth album that was going to be released after I had really embraced the band's music, and I got the one that has 2 bonus studio tracks as well as some bonus live material. But I'm not going to consider the bonus studio tracks. I'm just going to consider the original tracks for this album here. So the lineup is the same as the previous one, as far as I know, and I don't have any extra special notes about this. So I will say that this album does seem to get heavier in the heavy parts, but I think if you want to make an argument for what is the difference between heavy rock and heavy metal, I would say you could look at an album like Blackwater Park and say that is heavy metal, whereas Sorceress is more of a heavy rock album. And there is a lot of course, we're still on this 70s prog trip, so we're getting a lot of different you know, that grooving type of prog feel. We're getting some of the lighter stuff, even just the beginning of the title track, Sorceress, with that, you know, very much like a 70s prog band type thing. But then the song suddenly changes and you get that very straight up simple dun, 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 dun on the guitar. And I remember at the time an interview with Michael Åkerfeldt where he said that he just wanted to go for a really simple meat and potatoes kind of riff. And yeah, this song hits pretty hard and heavy with a dun 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 dun. I really like it. I find this song is one that really sticks in my head, and in fact, after having listened to it a few days ago, every day it's just popping into my head. And one of the videos I saw where one person was talking about the discography, he said this song has been in his head ever since he heard it. And at the time he made the video, In Caudia Venenum was the latest album, so it's been in his head for at least a few years. There are, going back to this now, a lot of tracks I really do like, disregarding the production. I really like Sorceress. I really like Will-o'-the-Wisp, which is a very gentle, nice piece. You have Chrysalis, which is a very heavy, aggressive piece. You have Era, which is rather a majestic piece. There's a lot of really good music on this album, as far as I'm concerned. I just honestly wish it had had some, you know, better production, better mixing. The song that I'm going to pick as my favorite here, however, is the song Strange Brew. To me, looking back on it now, it is almost like a dream. It starts off very soft and peaceful with just those simple kind of ringing organ notes and Michael singing, and this could almost be like a lullaby, like you are in bed, closing your eyes, and just thinking about some sorrowful event during the day, reflecting back on it, and you drift off, and then you get that clean electric guitar coming in, and then the dream starts. More of a nightmare, really. You get that very active, distorted keyboard sound, and then the band coming in, boom, 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 boom. Drums are really active, and now we're like really into the whole dream sequence there. Then you get Michael singing in between the sudden bursts of music, vocals, bursts of music, and then it gets into that whole bluesy, groovy part, and I think the title Strange Brew must almost have been inspired by one part where I feel that it's reminiscent of something from Cream's Disraeli Gears, which is the album that Strange Brew came from. There are actually a lot of references, or at least a few anyway, on this album, as there usually are, to some of 70s bands, and one of them, you know, Seventh Soldier, and one of the tracks is a reference to the Moody Blues album Seventh Soldier, and I would wager. But disregarding that, yeah, I really love that part. We get into that groovy blues part in the Strange Brew song. There is that guitar lick, that echoing sound, that almost feedbacky, distorted sound that really sounds like Disraeli Gears. And then it's like, for a moment, we are not in the dream or in the nightmare anymore. We are actually, you know, back sleeping, kind of stirring a little bit, still in the kind of dreamy sequence. And then back to the dream. Now it becomes very slow and very majestic, and, you know, lots of power behind it, and the vocals coming in. And at the very end, all that powerful, majestic music drops away, and it's just this, like, faint, weak, little soft closure to the whole thing, which is almost like you've woken up from this dream and it's morning, the sunlight is coming through the window, and you just have this vague memory of what the dream was in your head. So that's how I feel listening to Strange Brew recently. So that covers Heritage, Pale Communion, and Sorceress, my favorite songs being Famine from Heritage, River from Pale Communion, right now it could change again, and Strange Brew, which has remained a favorite of mine for a long time here from Sorceress. So in the next video I'm going to take a look at a couple of the older albums, so hopefully you'll stick around for that. Do leave your comments. What do you think about these three albums? Do you have some favorite songs? Do you think these albums are boring, like some people have said? Do you think they are really brilliant? Do you love the proggy side? Whatever, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll watch one of the other Opeth videos I have coming up. Cheers all, bye.